everyone, and thank you for coming to the God Business Book Talk. This event is hosted by the Center for Inquiry Canada, your community for science and secularism. My name is Onur Romano, and I am a co-organizer of the Center for Inquiry Victoria branch and the branch manager of the virtual branch. I'm also honored to serve as the human rights chair of our organization. CFIC is Canada's only national nonprofit with the mission of promoting and educating the public on critical thinking, science, and secularism. We work to equip people to make decisions based on evidence, rational thinking, and compassion. To that end, we hold events like this to provide an opportunity for you to engage with subject matter experts on a variety of topics. In these days of physical distancing, all of CFIC's events and activities are provided online, available from coast to coast to coast. We will be recording this talk for publication on CFIC's YouTube channel. You may wish to turn off your camera or rename yourself if you wish to stay anonymous. To minimize background noise, we have put everyone on mute. After Kato's talk, there will be a Q&A moderated by myself, during which the audience will have an opportunity to ask questions by using the chat feature in Zoom. All you need to do is to type your questions to me in the Zoom chat window. We rely entirely on donations and memberships to allow us to bring you events such as this. Please visit our website or email me for more information about how to become a member or make a donation. Now, I would like to introduce you to this evening's speaker, Kato Mukasa. Kato Mukasa is an old friend and a colleague. Kato is a lawyer who has served as a board member of Atheist Alliance International in 2015 and 16, while I was the president of the NGO. He was always very organized and a very hardworking director. He has also served for Humanists International and currently chairs Uganda Humanist Association. Tonight, we will have a journey into the making of his latest book, The God Business and the Death of Reason in Africa, which has taken him 5 years to put this 301-page piece of good work together. It's a book that gives you the history of Africa, slavery, colonialism, and imperialism. And it shows you how religion has been a major force in promoting mental slavery. A chapter is dedicated to African American history. The book offers radical proposals that empowers the reader. The book is available on Amazon, and you can find a link in the chat screen, which I will be sharing in a second. And here it is. Rest assured, towards the end of the talk, before we start the Q&A, I will ask Kato to give us some inside facts and updates about our mutual friend Mubarak Bala, the president of the Nigerian Humanists, who has been wrongfully detained since April 2020 due to his blasphemous Facebook posts. But first, we would like to take a journey into the writing of the book, The God Business. Welcome again, Kato, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, my brother Onur. Thank you for the good introduction. It's very much heartwarming. I'm happy to be here with you to share a few things with you about my work and about this book. Basically, this book is about us, it's about you, and it's about everyone who cares to know a few things about Africa and a few things about critical thinking and why it is important to have people in Africa, people in the world, embracing reasoning over superstition, over dogma, over beliefs that are in most cases taking us back. So, as you said, the book, The God Business, has taken me over 5 years putting together, because in between I could pause and ask myself whether if what I'm writing will not be able to put me in trouble, or if I'm writing is going to be welcomed by the public, because I was writing on very touching issues throughout this book. This book has 37 chapters, 37 chapters, including, of course, proposals for a way forward. But basically, I am looking at the history of Africa vis-a-vis the history of the world. And I'm also looking at the culture of the people in Africa. But I'm also looking at the impact of religion. And when I say religion, I'm talking about religion as a whole, in totality. I'm talking about African religion, because we also had religion here in Africa. But I'm also talking about the import of the religions that were brought by the colonialists, but also the imperialists in Africa. But I'm also looking at the totality, the effect of these beliefs on our people's psyche, on the way our people do things, on our politics, on our governance, on our economics. And then I look at the reality today, how such kind of thinking has influenced policies, has influenced our agriculture, has influenced our economy, has influenced our laws, the way we manage ourselves, because of our beliefs, and a lot of things happening, changing in the negative way, because people believe this must be the right thing to be done to appease God, and they shall not be able to do this. So the book really is a big exposure of what is happening largely in Africa, and how that kind of thinking has made of us, one of the people in Africa, be in a kind of prison, which I call the mental prison, that now we must struggle to break through so that we can be able to be free. When I took a critical look at what was happening around me and in different parts of Africa that I traveled in, that I've been reading about, I realized that we are lacking one major element, which is critical thinking. Perhaps it's lacking everywhere in the world, but when it comes here in Africa, it's getting worse. That there are countries I've gone to, over 16 countries in Africa where I've traveled, including my own country, Uganda, where I'm based, where we do make laws, we do make policies because religious leaders have said so, being influenced by the thinking of the majority, which is influenced by beliefs. And as I said, some of these beliefs may be because of our cultures, which have been influenced by our traditional religions, but also because of the new religions we have adopted. You have talked about Muhammad Bala. I do talk about Bala on page 71 of chapter 8. And that chapter, I call it the Fall of Reason. So my brother Muhammad Bala, who was the president of the Nigerian Humanist Association, is in prison today over a year because he has been accused of blasphemy. And you don't imagine that in this year and in this period of our epoch, people are still getting imprisoned because they have offended the others by talking about their gods. It's happening in other parts of the world. It's happening in Arabic countries, some of the Arabic countries, but it is also happening in Africa, where, an example of Nigeria, a country that is divided between Christianity and Islam, the area which is having so many Muslims, is in fact still implementing Sharia law, despite on paper, this country being secular. So it's the case of Bala, where you find that his father, who is a university professor, who is supposed to be a knowledgeable person, but also is a radical Muslim who has given up his child, who has participated in incarceration of his child because his child has become a disgrace to family. And this is about religion alone. So when you look at the effects of religion, just as an example, to the people in Africa, the effects are dire. The consequences have been big to many of us. So in this book, I take a brief in chapter 1 about Africa because I thought for a long time that many of us today do not basically know what Africa means. And by so doing, I did define Africa, where it is found, the countries that are found in, and the people, the cultures, and of course, emphasizing the fact that life, humanity began in Africa. And basically, all of us Africans, when we talk about Africa, it's not about the black man alone. It's about humanity, it's about the world. As science and history has proven us over and over that the origin of man has been actually in Africa. So Africa becomes a cradle of civilization, of humanity, that moving forward as a country, moving forward as a society, moving forward as a world, we need to know where we come from. We need to know how it all began. What I'm saying in brief is that the first chapter is an opener, an eye-opener for those who may not have an idea about what Africa is, the origins, and why we are here as humans. Of course, I do look at several other chapters where I talk about Africa, where I talk about Africans, and our cosmopolitan nature, our being an integral part of the world, and our being a people that involves everyone. But going forward, I also give a history, as we did mention, about slavery, but also give a history of imperialism, but also I give history of religions. And when I talk about religions now, I'm talking about the imported ones, because remember I said we have indigenous religions, which have been also of a great impact, but also we have the foreign religions, which have now taken over. And I do explain how these two forms of religion correlate, and how today some people have gone ahead to adopt the foreign religions over the traditional or indigenous religions, but still indigenous religions are dying hard. I mean, many people here I know of still practice their traditional indigenous religions silently. In the open, they may be openly professing to be Muslims, professing to be Christians, but in the darkness of the night, they are still practicing their traditional religions. When we move in public taxis, today in Uganda, for example, you are bound to see fetishes, you are bound to see stuff that symbolizes traditional religions. You are bound to see what people call symbols of witchcraft. Yeah, because to them, whatever now is practiced as traditional religion is part of witchcraft, is bad. The new religions have made it look bad to practice the traditional religion. So today, in many parts of Africa, you still see people who believe in the traditional religions, but also practice openly the new foreign religions. Part of it, I talk about how these religions came to Africa. When you look at chapter 4 of this book, I talk about how Mutesa invited mental slavery in Uganda, and which later became Uganda. So we look at the history, how Uganda embraced foreign religions, and that was through the works of a king called King Mutesa. And in that chapter, I give a detailed account of how all this happened and how the missionaries were able to touch base with the people in Uganda from about 15th November 1875. I'm talking about 1875. So when you look at the import of these foreign religions, for example, in Uganda from 1875 to today, and see how things have changed, of course, one would say there have been positive things the missionaries have brought here, but also the negatives are quite many, where some of us have gone to Christian schools, have gone to Muslim schools, and in these schools, what has been happening has been the indoctrination of the students. I was tutored throughout my student life as a child in missionary Christian schools. And lessons couldn't begin without a prayer. And teachers would teach us quoting the Bible, quoting the God in the heaven, even when it's a science class. Someone is emphasizing how everything cannot be done without a possibility of a God. So when you go to these churches, when you go to these schools, a child is properly indoctrinated from the start of his or her academic journey, and it becomes hard for people to get away, run away from the prison I call religion. I give a history briefly of my own life, how I was in these Christian schools and how I resisted going to church, how I resisted becoming an altar boy, and how it caused me problems, how I was suspended, how I went into the bad records of the school because the practices of the school were ultra religious, that being secular, trying to question how religion was impacting on our daily lives as students was basically punishable. So all these schools, from the church to the schools to home, continue to foster mental slavery. A child is told not how to think, but what to think, much of the time. That even when you graduate, if you're not able to read outside what the school offers you, it's very hard for someone to think contrary to what has been taught to him or to her for so many years. Imagine being in a home where your mother wants you to be a priest, like my mother wanted me to be a Catholic priest. And she is encouraging you to go to church. She's encouraging you to go to a seminary and become a priest, you know. And imagine having family members who are also believing in the same kind of stuff. All the things we talk about, the virgin birth, the resurrection, the miracles, are being talked about as if they are real. And a child is indoctrinated right from home, then to schools, then to worship centers, and to university. So it's very hard for this child who has been in this kind of tutoring for years to have a mind which is independent, which is outside the realm of what he has been taught for so many years. So if there's not the deliberate teaching of critical thinking, there's no deliberate allowing of questioning of what has been taught to this child for many years. Even when a child becomes a professor of science, in most cases, his knowledge of science is being influenced by his knowledge of God. And I do explain this in so many other chapters going forward, that you find many professionals who would be great scientists, but still believe in myth, still believe in dogma and superstition because they have been influenced. They have been influenced, they have been indoctrinated for a long, long time. And you find that you are going to a university and the professor comes to teach and starts with the word of God and starts with the word of prayer. I've been to universities and this has been done. When I was a student of the Islamic University in Uganda, basically Islam and Arabic were compulsory. So me, who had no Muslim background, was technically forced to learn Arabic and to learn Islam because the university had a policy up to now, which is still there, to ensure that all the students must be tutored must be indoctrinated to learn Islam and to learn Arabic. And the lecturers will emphasize that all of us who are not Muslims are lost. It's better to convert to Islam. And the same thing happens in the universities where there are so many Christians. We have the Christian University in Uganda, which also when you go there, people are going to tell you, they're teaching them the same. You are in a university studying law, but they are teaching you about Jesus as a component. They're teaching you religion as a component. So you find that indoctrination is throughout a wide spectrum, that students are tutored right from home to religious centers, to schools, how to believe stuff they can't question. And there's no room to allow you to question stuff. Now, in other chapters in this book, I'll just give a summary, it's a big book. I talk about what's wrong with Africans. In my chapter 29, I question what's wrong with people in Africa. And basically, I'm bringing these silent features. I'm bringing these issues I've been touching about, issues that have made intellectuals be unable to question things. I've given examples in this book, laws that have been made in this country, Uganda, and elsewhere that have been particularly influenced by our religious feelings, our religious beliefs. I talked about the Anti-Homosexuality Law in Uganda, in which I and my colleagues participated in ensuring that we challenge it in court and squashed finally. And this law was brought to Parliament as a gift to Ugandans going to Christmas. And the speaker then was saying, I've given Ugandans a nice gift by putting this law that is going to stop homosexuality. And to them, even parliamentarians do believe then and even today that homosexuality is a sin and condemned by the Bible, and homosexuals are people that must be arrested, tortured, and killed. And these are professionals, these are people deliberating for country, to make policies, to make laws, to move the country forward. But they have a mentality that homosexuals are a problem. In fact, I've argued before that their thinking was that the country was into debt, the country was into problems because of homosexuality. So these are things which show you that our intellectualism throughout the world basically has been very much dwarfed by our thinking, which is based on religion and dogma. Of course, I talk about people in society that are influential. I've talked about artists in this book. I've given examples of artists that have been influenced by their dogma, by their religion to basically compose music, which is changing attitudes, and not for the better, but for the worst, because they are praising gods, they are praising fallacies and dogmas, and they're increasing our people's inability to question stuff. When people talk about God and miracles and saying about them, to make sure that the listener thinks these are real things. They create stories in their songs to make a listener to think that God is real. They make videos in these musicals, which make sure that people actually are swayed to think that everything about the Bible and the Quran are facts. They have a big impact on the psyche of our people, especially when they're young. And people grow up seeing these musical videos, seeing these movies. I've talked about Nigerian movies, which have been on our market for a long time. And Nigerian movies basically have been promoting the Christian God largely. I think they are produced in an area which is Christian dominated. And these movies, which have been here for over 20 years, promote one thing, religion, promote one thing, God being the conqueror, being the one to defeat the bad forces. You know, you watch these movies, which have been on our market for a long time, and throughout Africa, which are promoting myth, which are promoting sorcery, which are promoting superstitions, which are promoting witchcraft. That's why our friends like Leo Igwe in Nigeria are battling against the forces that promote witchcraft. Young girls, young boys, elderly people are being killed blamed to be witches. And it's happening in Uganda, it's happening in Kenya and Tanzania and so many other countries in Africa here. We have seen albinos, which I talk about also, which are being killed because people do believe that they can be used in fetishes, in practices that can help people become rich. When they kill them, they cut off their heads, and they believe that they can use their heads to attract wealth. You know, these are beliefs. As I said, they are a combination of traditional beliefs and foreign beliefs. Chapter 24, for example, I talk about radicalization, and I single out an example of a popular musician called Vincent Segawa, who was initially Catholic, thinking about Catholicism and promoting the belief in Mary and all that kind of stuff, and then converted to Islam. And when he converted to Islam, he basically abandoned music because he went to the national media and said that Islam condemns music, that musicians are going to hell. And this was a popular musician. As I talk about today, as we talk about him today, he's in prison because it has been alleged that he's involved into activities that can promote terrorism, that can promote human trafficking. So, and I'm talking about a star. Vincent Segawa has been a star for over 20 years, a music star, a darling of the people, but he has converted from his Catholicism I was talking about, he has converted to Islam, and now he has become a radical. I talk about in the next chapter 25, I talk about the example of a man called Tarrant Brinton. Tarrant Brinton, if you all remember, who was radicalized and ended up killing people in New Zealand. So in 2019. And these are examples of how religion can radicalize. So basically the book is mental slavery in Africa, but I give examples here and there throughout the world how religion has made people less of critical thinkers and more of followers of dogma. And throughout the book, I give examples of how pastors, for example, in Africa have contributed to this kind of problem. How pastors in this country and throughout Africa, and I give names of these pastors, and in the US, I give a lot of examples in the US, how these pastors have made it a business. That's why I call it a God business, to make money out of selling one product, and that product is Jesus Christ, and that product is God. And this has been done for a long, long, long time. And Uganda, for example, we have pastors who are building mega churches. One of them is called Pastor Bujingo, Aloysius Bujingo. I talk about him in this book, one of the chapters where I dedicate it to these pastors in Uganda, where a man like Bujingo, Pastor Bujingo, is raising over $20 million. I'm saying $20 million to build a cathedral, to build a church as called the Pentagon. And he's building it amidst a very poor people. And to make matters worse, all these monies to build this church is coming from the people who cannot even afford 2 meals a day. But he has thousands of followers who work hard every day to go to his church, which is now not well built, but a piece of land about 8 acres in the middle of the city, dedicated to this church, attracting thousands of people each day, going to this place to worship a God through this pastor called Aloysius Bujingo, and donating money to build a $20 million church in a country where these people cannot afford 2 meals a day, are sick, cannot afford good medication. So instead of even thinking about building a hospital, instead of thinking about building a vocational training college so that he can offer practical skills, he's building a church. He's planning, he's raising money to build a church where we have thousands of churches in Uganda. So you see that all these things are being done to basically enrich these people I call pastorpreneurs. That's the time I call these pastors, because for them, their business is selling God. Their business is building churches and amassing lots of wealth. So basically, I talk about human rights in this book. When you look at chapter 31, it's on civil liberties and human rights in Africa. And I do explain how many of our civil liberties and human rights efforts have been curtailed because people believe that leaders come from God and leaders shouldn't be questioned. We end up having dictators throughout Africa, and I do give examples, who do rule. They don't lead in most cases, they are rulers. But many people do believe that these rulers actually come from God, and they end up abusing taxpayers' money, they end up abusing people's rights, killing people. But some people, and especially some religious leaders, come out often to praise the leaders and to tell everyone that what we have as leaders cannot be questioned because they are representing God. I do talk about vaccinations in chapter 32 of this book, and I do emphasize that the process has been delayed, basically because of lack of education. People are not being properly taught, and there are so many theories and conspiracy theories about vaccination, and all these are rooted in ignorance and fear. And sometimes religious leaders basically make it worse, where some religions don't believe that it's right to have our people vaccinated. And we find that there is a lot of apathy, there is a lot of negativity about vaccinations, because people have mixed feelings from a lot of corners. People blaming this to that, people uh, always finding excuses to tell people that vaccines don't work. But basically, it's the way government implements them. It's the way government doesn't deliberately educate people. It's the way people are tuned into thinking that someone somewhere wants to harm them. So I do talk about vaccinations, and I give tips on how we can create awareness so that science can take over dogma and superstition. And I do explain basically the history of vaccinations in this book and how it's important to be vaccinated, giving myself as an example, who grew up with a mother who was a nurse and was vaccinated and was not able to get polio and all these other killer diseases. So we do emphasize in this book that vaccination is important, but it's much important to promote awareness, to promote education about all of it. And finally, because I don't want to talk forever, the book looks into the practical realities, and you do give suggestions on how we can move forward as a people in Africa. And I dedicate an entire chapter to this. But in brief, I'm talking about promoting education that is compatible with critical thinking, with reason and reality. And I'm saying that the education we have today lacks that. That we can be a professor, you can be a lawyer like myself, you can be a medical doctor who still believes in superstitions, who still believes in witchcraft. So to me, that kind of education has not empowered you to think for yourself. So we need to have a radical shift, to have a balanced system that promotes questioning, that promotes critical thinking, that as well as it's good to study about the regions, it's also good to have a time to ask, to question these very regions. Of course, I talk about the type of skills we need to be engaged in. I talk about throughout the book, one of the chapters in the book, I talk about how imperialism has affected Africa, our trade, our economics, our politics, how it is affecting us today. Look at West Africa, which I talk about, how imperialism still rears its ugly heads in the affairs of so many West African countries. So briefly, in these chapters, I give practical way out on the economy, on education, on how we can have critical thinking amidst us. And I give examples of the human schools in Uganda, which are trying their level best to promote an education that is balanced, where yes, people can talk about religion, but at the same time, critical thinking being taught in our schools. And I do give many other practical examples, as I said, on economy, and as I said, on how we can pull everything together for the benefit of humanity and humankind. So basically, the book is a big book, but it offers all those insights into the history of Africa, into colonialism, into imperialism, and into the present day Africa. And it shows you the trouble we are in as the people living here. Of course, I talk about foreign investments in Africa and how it has been abused by the governments, by the investors, and by the people who are being exploited. And then I do talk about how we can balance the economy, how we can balance foreign investments, how we can be able to make it work for the people, for the benefit of all, the investor and the people found in Africa. So basically, the book is about opening the mindset, opening the thinking, having a paradigm shift about how things should be done in Africa. But basically, I look at religion as one big element, one big factor. Many economists have forgotten. I do quote Paul Collier in this book, The Bottom Billion, and other books, because I have an advantage of having read economics at the university before I went to law school. So I look at the economy of Africa in totality, and I look at authors that have been talking about Africa, being poor, being misgoverned, without basically looking at how religion, how the beliefs have contributed to all that poverty, all that misrule. So I bring in that missing element the economists have been leaving out. When they talk about Africa, they talk about wars. They don't explain how religion actually creates these wars, how religion fuels these wars. I give examples of wars in Nigeria, wars in Uganda, conflicts in different parts of Africa that have been there because basically of religious divisions, where Muslims are fighting against Christians. I talk about the history of religious wars in Uganda and South Africa in this book to show the reader that basically don't underestimate the role, the influence, the impact of gods, the impact of religion on the psyche, on the mental faculty of our people. So briefly, my brother Ona and the listeners and the viewers, that is it. A brief insight about the God business in Africa and the death of reason in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kato. And well, okay, I will admit this is gonna feel a little bit weird having only myself on the screen. Yeah, but at least we'll have some usual. And I'm gonna stop sharing screen now. Oh, I did stop sharing screen already. Okay, during your talk, I was sharing the cover of your phone. I mean, cover of your book. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah.
So, yes, to minimize background noise, we have muted participants' microphones. And this event will be published on CFIC YouTube channel, and some of the participants do not wish to be seen or heard in the videos, which forces us to edit the video, and then that causes delays in publishing it. So we have found a solution to this problem. In order to include the Q&A part of this talk in the video, we will be publishing. I will be reading the questions of our guests on your behalf. So if you have any questions, please use the chat option, which you can find in the tab at the bottom of your screen. Once you type in your question, I will address your question to Kato. And we would like to provide the opportunity for as many of you as possible to ask your questions. So please try to ask your question and try to make it brief and to the point. So The first question is from Frank. Frank asks, how damaging are the USA Christian missionaries, and why the local elites work with them?
Okay, thank you very much. How damaging, it is bad, really. I do talk about it in this book. I give, for example, the import of the anti-homosexuality laws in Africa, which are basically foreign laws. The British, for example, for us who are colonized by the British, gave us these laws against homosexuality, but also just recently, early 2000, it was the missionaries, I call them missionaries, the Pentecostals, we call them the born-again evangelists from USA that introduced homophobia, a new wave of homophobia in Uganda. In fact, as I did say, the introduction of hate and the origin of the anti-homosexuality law in Uganda in 2010 to 2014 was a direct result of pastors from the US coming to Uganda and talking with the president and talking with the members of parliament that Uganda is a nation of God and they should not allow US government influencing them in supporting gays. This is when we had the Kill the Gay bill. A man called Scott Lang, there was a pastor called Scott from the US, among others, were here to talk to the president, to talk to the parliamentarians about the need to have a law against homosexuality. And they did have it finally in Uganda. So you can see the influence of these pastors on our people here and on the decision makers here. It's quite big.
Thank you. And Frank has another question. What is happening to traditional African animists, religiousness?
Oh, yeah. What's happening is that people here, as I did say in the book here and in the talking, we have what we call double worshiping, where people still believe in their indigenous religions, but also want to be fashionable. They want to fit in society, so they also profess to be Christians or Muslims or whatsoever. But again, as I point out in the book, we also have people who specifically worship the traditional religions and gods. And we have a movement in Uganda, for example, which is led by a lady called Mama Fina, Sylvia Namuteri. That lady has a big following of thousands and thousands of followers who openly say, for us, we are for the traditional religions. And of course, we also have breakaway churches, which we call independent churches in Africa. And I've given examples throughout Africa where someone is, say, a catechist and then thinks he cannot fit into Catholicism and therefore starts their own sect. They call them cults here in much of Africa. So you find that a cult practices some aspects of Christianity, but also some aspects of traditional religions. So they haven't died that much. They're still alive, but different versions and fashions. Yeah.
Our next question is from Christia. And you mentioned that you have traveled to a few different countries for your research. Which countries did you research?
Oh yeah, I've gone to Rwanda, I've gone to Kenya, I've gone to Burundi, I've gone to Tanzania, I've gone to Ethiopia, I've gone to Ghana, and I've gone to Egypt. I've gone to these countries basically to learn. And when I was a chair for the African Working Group, I was able to move to different African countries, basically to promote humanism, basically to promote critical thinking. So I've traveled some of these countries, but of course, given the Zoom, these online meetings we have had over the years, I've been able to interact with so many people across Africa that I was able to be in touch with many of these Africans across the continent.
Next question comes from Russo, and she is saying, would it be fair to make a connection between the Stockholm Syndrome and African religious minorities?
The religious minorities. That's interesting. You know, with the Stockholm Syndrome, you basically praise your oppressor. I mean, you think that even when people think it's bad, it's basically good. Yeah, and that's it. That's it. And I think that's what is affecting many of us in Africa, where you think, for example, that, oh, the missionaries have taken our land. They have actually been used to bring imperialism here and all this, but they're good because they're giving us salvation. They're giving us hope that there is life after death. Basically, we shall go to heaven. I mean, there are so many bad things being done by religious people, but people do think that it's good after all because God demands it, because it's a way of honoring, praising God. I mean, the connection is big in a way that because people cannot think independent of religion, even the bad thing that happened, even when you see a pastor is becoming wealthy overnight using your own tithe, after all you say, no, but he's praying for me and I'm better. And without him, I would not have this money I've given to the pastor. So even when you point out how bad these practices are, how exploitative these churches are, how dangerous Islam is in Africa, the consolation that it gives something good, the good feeling, the hope of resurrection and a better life in the next world makes people comfortable. And that's the perfect way of showing the Stockholm Syndrome I'm talking about.
Thank you. So I will get to my personal question, which is about our mutual friend, Mubarak Bala. So would you be able to give us some insight, facts, and some updates about his situation? Because I believe a high court has ordered for his release a few months ago.
Yes.
But even though the high court has ordered for his release, he still is not released and he is still under detention. How does that happen, that a lower court disobeys the high court?
Yeah, quite interesting. Yes, I did give a touch on Mubarak Bala in this book. When you read it, you'll find it there. But let me give you the current update about this situation. That Nigeria is sharply divided into two blocks, if I can use that. The northern part of it is mainly influenced by Islamic practices. I don't even want to call it laws, because the country, if you look at the constitution, is supposed to be secular on paper. Nigeria is supposed to be a secular country where everyone is good to go, where Muslims can live peacefully with Christians, where there's no dominant religion. You know, that's on paper, on the constitution. But when you look at the practical part of it, the northern part of it is largely influenced by Islamic doctrines. And then the southern part of it is largely influenced by the Christianity. Oh, it's a little bit secular. So I have friends who are in the northern part of it, but cannot openly say, I'm a humanist. I'm an atheist because the Muslims there, and it's a big part of the country. The Muslims there will kill you, will arrest you, will harm you. So Mubarak Bala found himself trapped in the northern part of the country, which is largely influenced by Islam. And now, even when a court decides on his fate, the clerics have their kind of courts, the Sharia courts, and they have a lot of political influence that even the police officers, the people have been arresting Bala, the police officers are radical Muslims. And even when I talked about his father, in this book, I talk about the father of Bala, a university professor who is a radical Muslim who has gone into bed with the oppressors of Bala and says it's fine to have my child in prison because it's a disgrace. So you find that court is passing an order that do present this man to courts of law, that please give him bail. Court has pronounced itself on that. But the influence, which is political, not legal, political, has made court appear useless. Court orders have been rendered null and void. Political reasons that override the legal domain of a country. The country is largely polarized between Christians and Muslims, and Bala found himself in the northern part of the country, sadly.
Well, and do you think there will be any progress in his case, since that a few U.S. agencies are, raised their voices of and concern, and also there is an international campaign going on with Humanists International, Amnesty International, and a few other big organizations involved. It didn't make much difference. Well, it may have influenced the High Court's decision, but then again, nobody really carries on that decision. So do you think there will be any progress, any changes, and where do you see this is going?
Yeah, I do believe the work of our international allies, NGOs in the world, all calling for the release of Bala, have been very important and instrumental in seeing him alive, for example, or knowing that he's alive today. Because I had fears initially that he may be executed, he may be killed in prison. But I believe that the coming out of Humanists International, Atheist Alliance, and all these other organizations has really helped to create some bit of a fear, if I can use that word, in the minds of his captors, that the world is watching. And to me, that's very, very important. When people know that someone is watching your back, they'll be a bit careful not to kill you. Because here, killing someone is on the cheap. I mean, life is not valued much of the time. So I do thank the organization, and I believe they have done a tremendously good job keeping Bala alive. But in terms of getting him a release from this dungeon and the prison, I do believe it's going to be a bit hard. Because as I said, this is political. This is political, and it's a way of showing who is more powerful than the other. And now it's between Islam as a religion and Muslims as a people against the rest of the world. And now they are using Mubarak as a chip, as a token to fight. I mean, and has become a tool of bargaining, to me, in my understanding. And I believe now the Nigerian government wants to use Bala as a chip to bargain a few things with the international community. That's what I'm thinking, because he has become political. The courts may pronounce themselves, but the guys holding him, the region where he is imprisoned, the Muslims having influence over his arrest, make demands, make political demands, and these are covert much of the time. So he has become a political tool that it's going to take lots of effort of negotiating between governments, not even between organizations. I do believe governments now are needed, not even embassies alone can do this. And it's because Bala to me has become a political chip, has become a weapon, has become a tool to bargain, to negotiate between governments. And becoming political has made his quite hard.
Yeah, I understand. So I will be making a closing statement, but please, our participants and guests, don't go anywhere because I will just do a closing statement for the YouTube video, but then I will stop recording and I will unmute all of you and open the cameras so we can have a roundtable discussion for another 15-20 minutes. So thank you, Kato, for this enlightening and entertaining presentation. As I mentioned at the beginning, we are Canada's only national nonprofit for science and free thought. We hope that those of you who are not already members will consider purchasing a membership. We will include a link to our membership page in the chat window and through Meetup. I hope that you will consider joining. Not only does your membership provide financial support to CFIC, it also adds your voice to that of others who support science, critical thinking, and secularism. As we grow in numbers, so does our influence with government decision makers and the public opinion that guides them. We advocate for evidence-based decisions on government policy, healthcare, public education, and human rights. If concerns like climate change, blasphemy laws, education curriculum, medical pseudoscience are important to you, please become a CFIC member. In today's landscape, there are too many people spreading misinformation and trying to mislead you. Without us, the major influencers will continue to be large, self-interested groups and institutions that benefit from making baseless claims and spreading pseudoscientific nonsense. So please consider a membership. It's only $30 a year. Finally, a big thanks to the CFIC volunteers. If you would like to volunteer with CFIC, you can sign up on our website. There are many interesting positions for you to choose from. Now, I will try to unmute all of your microphones, and please let's give Kato a big round of applause. Thank you and have a great night.